evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thundercloud. Sometimes I'm silent, sometimes I'm loud. I am a poet of poetry and prose, words of change of love, and sometimes flowers and also roses. Oh, I'm excited, for sure. It's been 2 years since I arrived here in Guyra to create the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. And let's begin by acknowledging country where this broadcast is coming from, Banjo to Murray-Rainwater land, and the continuing connection to the land of the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. And moving right along, well, this Friday night is our second birthday celebration. It coincides with the 101st birthday of the Guyra Ghost. So we're having a ghostly fools dress-up party night. Yeah, there'll be poetry and dancing and music and stuff like that, and food. So come along, it's from 7 o'clock here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, and if you're watching, you're invited. Yeah, it's true. Now, I've got to practice for the night because I've got to put on a bit of a poetry show. Now, Judith Wright was from around here, this district. She lived down in Armadale and stuff. She was born on the 31st of May 1915 and left us on the 25th of June 2000. She was a prolific poet, a critic, a short story writer, published more than 50 books, and she was also an uncompromising environmentalist and social activist and campaigning for Aboriginal land rights. She believed that the poet should be concerned with national and social problems. And she's a pretty wise woman, obviously. We all should be. Well, it's up to you, really. Anyway, one of her poems is South of My Days. And it's sort of like I can, it's blowy and windy and it's cold up here in Guyra. It's like 1,300 metres high and like there's wind and blowy. It's 13 degrees and it's very cold and wet and rainy at the moment today. And this is, it makes me think. Anyway, this is Judith Wright's South of My Days. South of my days circle. Part of my blood's country rises at tableland high, delicate outline of bony slopes, wincing under the winter. Low trees, blue-leaved and olive outcropping granite, clean, lean, hungry country. The creek's leaf silenced, willow choked the slope, a tangle of medlar and crab-apple branching over and under, blotched with a green lichen, and the old cottage lurches in for the shelter. Oh, cold the black frost night, the walls draw into the warmth, and the old roof cracks its joints, the slung kettle hisses a leak on the fire. Hardly to be believed that summer will turn up again, someday in a wave of rambler roses. Thrust its hot face in here to tell another yarn, the story old Dan can spin into a blanket against the winter. 70 years of stories he clutched round his bones, 70 years are hived in him like old honey. Drove him that year, Charleville to the Hunter, 1901 it was, and the drought beginning. 60 head left at the McIntyre, the mud round them hardened like iron, and the old yellow boy died in the sulky ahead with the gear that the horse went on. Stopped at Sandy Camp and waited in the evening. It was the flies we seen at first, swarming like bees. Came to the hunter, 300 head of 1,000, cruel to keep them alive, and the river was dust. Or mustering up in the Bogle-And in the autumn, when the blizzards came early, brought them down. We brought them down. What aren't there yet will drive in for cogs on the run, up from Tamworth. Thunderbolt at the top of Hungry Hill, and I give him a wink. Wouldn't wait long, Fred. Not if I was you. Troopers are just behind. Coming for that job at Hillgrove. He was like a loony on him on his big black horse. Oh, they slide and vanish as he shuffles the years like a pack of conjurers' cards. True or not, it's all the same, and the frost on the roof cracks like a whip, and the back bulb break into ash. Wake, old man, this is winter, and the yarns are over. No one's listening, south of my day's circle. I know it dark against the stars, the high, lean country, full of old stories that still go walking in my sleep. And that's Judith Wright. Yeah. Well, another one I'm going to do for you, it's actually very well known by a lot of people, and his name's by a poet called $10 Banjo. Well, not really. His name was Banjo Paterson. But you'll find him on the $10 note, the blue one. And on the other side is Mary Gilmore, and she's also a very famous poetess, if there's such a thing. But the $10 note is the poet's note. Anyway, moving right along. Now, the original Waltzing Matilda, before it was bought by the Billy T lady, well, he wasn't such a jolly swagman. Well, you know, for some reason he ended up in the drink, didn't he? Yeah. And he didn't camp by a billabong. He camped in the billabong. And the other thing about, waltzing Matilda, your Matilda was your swag, and that is sort of slang from the German settlers that came out here, and in the way that back in wartime they would take the war prostitutes with them, and they were called Matildas. So what's humping your Matilda was carrying your swag, because you didn't actually have any of that. So, yeah, anyway, waltzing Matilda, carrying a swag. The original version before it turned into a jolly swagger. And it's believed that Banjo was having a bit of a dig there at the people on the neighbouring property at Winton who might have or might not have been responsible for the unfortunate incident where the swagman ended up in the drink, along with 3 policemen who were also witnesses. That's their version. And there once was a swagman camped in the billabongs under the shade of a coolabah tree, and he sang as he looked at the old Billy Boyle-In, who'll come a-waltzing Matilda with me. Who'll come a-waltzing Matilda, my darling? Who'll come a-waltzing Matilda with me? Waltzing Matilda, leaning a water bag. Who'll come a-waltzing Matilda with me? Up came the jumbuck to drink at the waterhole, Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him with glee, and he sang as he poured him away in his tucker bag. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, my darling. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Waltzing, Matilda, lead in a water bag. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Up sprang the swagman and jumped into the water hole, drowning himself by the cool tree. And his voice can be heard as it sings in the billabong. Oh, come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. And I missed the whole verse there. The bit where up came the squatter riding on his thoroughbred. Up came the policeman, 1, 2 and 3. Whose is the jumper you've got in the tucker bag? You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, my darling. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Waltzing, Matilda, and leading a water back. You'll come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. And then it goes into the up sprang the swagman and jumped into the water hole, drowning himself by the pool above the tree. And his ghost voice, and his voice can be heard as it sings in the billabong. Oh, come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Oh, come a-waltzing, Matilda, my darling. Oh, come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Waltzing, Matilda, leading a water bag. Oh, come a-waltzing, Matilda, with me. Well, probably the most famous bit of poetry written in Australia that many people know. That one. They may not know the original version, which is the one I've just sung with a few mistakes in it. And there was another waltzing Matilda, was the one played and the band played Waltzing Matilda. Now this is a song about the Anzacs, and it's an anti-war poem, I guess, a bit of an anti-war song. When I was a young man, I carried a pack, and I lived the free life of a rover. From the Murray's green banks to the dusty outback, I was my Matilda all over. Then in 1915 the country said, son, there's no time for roving, there's work to be done. So they gave me a tin hat and they gave me a gun, and they sent me away to the war. And the band played Waltzing Matilda, as our ship pulled away from the quay, and amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, we sailed off for Gallipoli. Oh, how well I remember that terrible day when our blood stained the sand and the water, and how in the hell that they called Suvla Bay we were butchered like lambs at the slaughter. Johnny Turkey was waiting, he primed himself well, he showered us with bullets and he rained us to hell, and in 10 minutes flat he'd blown us to hell, nearly blew us right back to Australia. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as we stopped to bury our slain. We buried ours, the Turks buried theirs. Then we started all over again. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as our ship pulled away from the quay. Amidst all the cheers of flag waving and tears, we sailed off for Gallipoli. Well, how well they collected the crippled, the wounded and maimed, and they shipped us back home to Australia. The armless, the legless, the blind and insane, all the brave wounded heroes of Suvla. And when our ship pulled into Circular Quay, I looked at the place where my legs used to be, and I thanked Christ there was nobody waiting for me to grieve and to mourn and to pity. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as they carried us down the gangway, but nobody cheered, they just stood there and stared, and they turned their faces away. So now every April I sit on my porch and I watch the parade pass before me, and I see my old comrades, how proudly they march, relieving old dreams and past glories. But the old men march slowly, their bones stiff and sore, tired old men from a tired home. And the young people ask, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. But the band played Waltzing Matilda, and the old men they answer the call. But year by year, those old men disappear. And I've done Moving right along, here's one about, well, done one, that was by Eric Bogle of the Bushwhackers. Now the next one is from $10 Mary. Yeah, Dame Mary Gilmore. She was born in, well, the 16th of August 1865 and died on the 3rd of December 1962. She was a writer, a prolific journalist known for prolific contributions to Australian literature. And she wrote both prose and poetry and contributed to the broader national discourse. She was born in rural New South Wales. Anyway, moving right along, she lived to 97! Oh, goodness gracious, and what a legend, hey? And she's now $10 Mary because she was such a good poet and contributor, just like $10 Banjo. This one, well, because it's this is coming up to the 101st anniversary of the Gyra Ghost. Yeah, the 31st of March, 1st of April was when the ghost started. Ooh, now that's a real interesting bit of history there about like this house in Gyra. Ooh, was rocked and like rattled and stuff for about 6 weeks. Yeah. 101 years ago, 1921. Anyway, this one is A Little Ghost by Dame Mary Gilmore. The moonlight flutters from the sky to meet her at the door. A little ghost whose steps have passed across the creaking floor, and rustling vines that lightly tap against the window pane throw shadows on the whitewashed walls to blot them out again. The moonlight leads her as she goes across a narrow plain, by the old familiar ways that know her steps again. And through the scrub it leads her on and brings her to the creek. But by the broken dam she stops, and seems as she would speak. She moves her lips, but not a sound ripples the silent air. She wrings a little hand up. Ah me, the sadness of despair. While overhead the black duck's wing cuts like a flash upon the startled air that scarcely shrinks. Eerie afar is gone, and curlews wake and wailing cry, curlew, 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 till all the bush with nameless dread is pulsing through and through. The moonlight leads her back again and leaves her at the door. A little ghost whose steps have passed across the creaking floor. Here's another one. This one is by the legend who only died, I think, Candy Royale-a, who only died about 3 or 4 years ago or something like that. She was at the tender age of 37. It's a short one. It's called A Trillion Tiny Awakenings. It's like, you know, when you're doing poetry and everyone makes a different meaning out of the same group of words because everyone's experiencing the world differently. And this is something that is really good to read out at the beginning of a poetry night. A Trillion Tiny Awakenings by Candy Royale. Listen to this non-prophet, this high priestess of poetry. No more hatred, just love. We are pure love. We are pure love. And this gathering, every gathering, is sacred. Listen. Pause for effect. Yeah, what a magnificent piece of poetry in its conciseness. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to move right along. Here's one by the great poet Les Murray, who only died in 2019. It's called Rainwater Tank. It's probably, one of those ones that you read out in the drought. So, not at the moment, because it's really, really rainy. But anyway, we're not going to talk about the weather. Why not? I'm Thundercloud. I can talk about rain and storms, and I love them. Oh, they make me go, oh, gee, just thinking about storms and lightning and boom and hail and all of that stuff, and wind and yeah. Rainwater Tanks by Les Murray. Rainwater Tank. Empty rings when tapped give tongue. Rings that are tense with water talk. As he sounds them rung by rung, Joe Mitchell's reddened knuckles walk. The cattle dog's head sinks down another notch and another notch beside the tank. And Mitchell's boy, with an old jack plane, lifts moustaches from a plank. From the puddle that the tank has dripped, hens peck, glimmerings and up tilt their heads to shake the quickness down. Petunias live on what gets spilt. The tank stand spider adds a spittle thread to her portrait of her soul. Pencil grey and stacked like shillings out of a banker's paper roll stands the tank. Roof, water, drinker. The downpipe stares drought into it. Briefly the kitchen tap turns on, then off, but the tank says debit, debit. Pause for effect. Lovely, hey? What a legend. I really like some of Les Murray's stuff. In fact, well, go and look up The Cows on Killing Day. That's interesting. Now, another amazing poet was actually a performance poet from Melbourne, Fitzroy in fact, and he was a owner of a antique bookstore. His name was Shelton Lee, also known as the Prince of Fitzroy. He didn't live that old. He also died in his 50s actually. But anyway, this is Fitzroy by Shelton Lee. Come out of Fitzroy like a swimmer coming up for air. The total degradation of a race is never so obvious when you face streets full of children sucking lollies next to old men with no tomorrows who rock on broken chairs and stare at a bitumen sea and bash people's sleeves along the loneliness, noses bleeding. We are in mourning. Brah, says Reg, Aboriginal Week. For us is the not-so-gentle touch of the gubba. At least we know the family. My cousins I can trace as far as Perth. You don't hurt me none, brah, for the wind is different here in Fitzroy. It's our land, won by fists and diatribe, where we can stalk the remnants of the sense of tribe, where within ourselves we count. This ID card we shrug, we know who the fuck we are. Undeniable is our dream, and we count for it, as much as weeds count, and we are indefatigable. And knowing that buildings that surround us are not of our making, we sniff out what's beneath the stuff. Salutations are warnings of places not to go, spaces between the applause. We have survived despite you. Our turn will come. It is not beyond us to dream, but my gore rises like the clouds across a thinner moon, as if you sit outside, as if you sit inside a chair and move it around the room. We know the certainty of the streets much more than you. This place beneath your feet is our dream. This place we used to meet much more than you know. We know the street. Now, another poet from up this way, Armadale, Uralla, and Hillgrove. Now, earlier in Judith Wright's poem South of Our Days, she talked about Thunderbolt, Captain Thunderbolt, who was a bushranger around this area, Fred Ward, going and doing a job out at Hillgrove. Now, Hillgrove was a mining town. So, so Mollie McNutt, she was a teacher in Uralla and Hillgrove. And she also won the Good League Bird Lovers competition for literary competition in 1912 and 1913. And I found out about Mollie McNutt through a friend, a person I met on Facebook, Jane Lally, who asked if I was interested in this book and finding out more. And I met her, she came here to the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, and sure enough, she's written a book about Mollie McNutt. Now, you should, Songbird it's called, and you should look it up and get it. I've got some for sale here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. But this is not about her bush poems, because her bush poetry is absolutely superb. This is Mollie McNutt we're talking about now. This one, but she had also a lot of poetry published in newspapers and stuff like that. Anyway, this one is called The Quarrel, because she was a teacher, okay? Two little maidens fell out one day, angrily turned from each other's way. Such little friends they had been, you see. Soon they were sorry as they could be. Neither was ready to own the blame. Daily the trouble still worse became. School lessons suffered, and so one day two little girls were debarred from play. Someone who came to the schoolroom door smiled as if pleased at the sight she saw. Ripples of gold mixed with curls of brown. Two little heads on desk laid down, tiptoed away with a radiant face, leaving them happy in their disgrace. So, that's it. Now, moving right along. other stuff we're going to practice. Okay, this is one by yours truly, because we're having a party on Friday night at 1, the 1st of April, and this is called the Space Monsters Party. How do space monsters throw a party? They plan it. Boom, boom. How do space monsters get their baby to sleep? Rocket. Boom, boom. Let's go. The Space Monsters Party. The Space Monsters decided to have a monster ball. So he sent invitations out via space mail and a follow-up call. Space monsters came from far and wide and other dimensions by warping time and space and using their inventions. There were one-eyed, two-eyed monsters, scary, also hairy, big teeth, also naked, and one that looked like a strawberry. They were drinking Monster Punch and eating Monster Chips when a family arrived from Beetlejuice on a fleet of monster ships. It was a fantastic monster party and no one would dare knock it. When the baby monster cried, they all took turns to rock it. They held a Monster Beauty contest and everyone was in it, but the one named Pretty Ugly was always going to win it. The party was held on a planet with a 100-hour day. After the party finished, the space monsters all teleported away, left behind empty monster cans and an awful mess, but all the space monsters agreed that the party was the best ever. Awesome, like fantastic monster party. They lived on a place with a 100-hour day. Well, we could probably do with a toilet break, because, but then hey, time is like a trip to the toilet. That's another one of mine. Time is like a trip to the toilet. A long line to waiting is going to spoil it. Or you might just walk straight in and find an overflowing bin that hasn't been cleaned for a while. Sometimes in toilets are vile. Some visits are very quick, other times will make you sick. Then at times you feel queer, spraying vile diarrhea, vomiting and on your knees on time and clean like Japanese toilets with technology. You warm your bum up as you pee, sit and happily contemplate, check the time. Oh shit, I'm late! This toilet's out of order. In the meantime, you're free to use the one on the 10th floor. Now, what is poetry exactly? Like, it's just thoughts and words written down. That's about it. Nothing major. That's what it is. What's poetry? Does it have a colour? Well, let's, this is one by T. Rankin. It's called Mickety Mulga. It's about a fellow who wanted to boil his billy. Now, billy is like your teapot. He worked with us at Wantigong, old Mickety Mulga Jim. We'd all have gone blue and mouldy if it hadn't have been for him. He'd keep us yarning at the fire and laughing, be the hour at his amusing anecdotes. Oh, by George, he had the power. He told us up in Queensland he'd never go again. He'd come to some dry old waterhole upon a 10-mile plain. The tank was dry, Jim was dry, but by a happy thought he wrung his empty water bag and he got about a quart. But he couldn't find a stick of wood to boil his billy by, so he stuck a match into the grass, which then was pretty dry. He held the billy to the flame with a bit of fencing wire, but had to go and follow it, so rapid run the fire. 5 miles across that flaming plain he raced that fire, did he? But when at last the billy boiled, he'd forgot to add the tea. Right, Mickety Mulga. So that's what's really good about poetry. You can tell funny stories as well. You can tell things about 2 little maidens having a blue and like sitting down by, like putting their head down on the desk. And you can talk about little ghosts and all kinds of stuff, and how time is like a trip to the toilet. Now, I suppose, like, I love rainbows. Thundercloud, I'm washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after it rains. Everybody knows my mum calls me James. James? James out No, you're not. The Colour of Poetry by yours truly, Thundercloud Repairian. If poetry were a colour, it would be a multifaceted rainbow, red sunsets of beauty and anger, pristine white as falling snow, orange of the desert plains, yellow of the sunflowers, changing hues of fiery flames, grey clouds bringing showers, magenta like a summer rose, ochre like the land and sand, peacock tails when they pose, emerald green forest stand, azure, blue as clear sky, turquoise of a tropical sea, eucalyptus bluish green, changing coloured maple tree, pink of the cherry blossoms, pinkish orange of peach, tea stains on teacup bottoms, and a golden sandy beach. The browns of nightingales, soft purple lavender hues, blues of big blue whales, and a colour called wisteria, and another called burnt bamboo. Pastel green and also mint. The liquid black of writing ink. Don't forget baby pink. Poetry is a rainbow to make you think. Well, how beautiful is that one, eh? It's a beautiful poem about colours of everything, like flowers and stuff. Bird bamboo. Ha 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 ha. Here we go. We're going to do another one. Should I do one of Henry Lawson's, or should I do one of how about Henry Lawson's mum? Yeah. Henry Lawson had a mum. Her name was Louise Lawson. Actually, this reminds me of a book I read about, like a troll. Once upon a time, there was a great, big, hairy, scary, mean-looking troll with eyes as big as pies and great, huge, sharp teeth. But he did have a mum. Anyway, that's another book. Louise Lawson is Henry Lawson's mum. She was born at Gunterwang Station near Bogle-And, New South Wales, on the 17th of February 1848. So she was an Aquarius. So she must have been awesome, because I'm also an Aquarius. Married life made her a feminist, and she spent 35 years of her life fighting for women's rights. In 1902, when Women's Suffrage League of New South Wales celebrated victory at last in obtaining the vote for women, Louisa was referred to as the mother of womanhood suffrage, a great tribute among so many other women who had fought and worked for the right for women to vote. This is called A Woman's Love by Louise Lawson. A woman's love. I cared not what their feelings were, thy faults I would not see. Oh, I'm going to start that again because I messed it up. I cared not what their failings were, their faults I would not see. I only knew I loved thee well and thought thee true to me. I shunned amid life's busy crowd those who would thee defame, for oh, it pained a trusting heart to hear men idly blame. I would not heed when meddling friends would whisper aught of thee. I thought not one so seeming true could e'er be a traitor be. And then they knew no of thy tone, oh, of love and fond caress that would my soul responsive move with its great tenderness. Nor how my hungry aching heart craved the kind world or smile that did my thoughts despondent grow from my sad life beguile. They knew not a mortal shell all thou hast been to me, but I forgive thee all because thou once wert true to me. Now there's an interesting word, wert, W-E-R-T. So it's like a word that, like with a T sound, wert, like, yeah, past tense. Interesting. Now, let's see what else I got here. Lesbia, Harford. Born in the 9th of April, 1891, to the 5th of July, 1927, was an Australian poet, novelist and political activist. Speaking of the 9th of April, Fiore Musicale is coming to the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame on the 9th of April at 3 p.m. in the afternoon with guest conductor Erin Heliard from the Pinch Gut Opera. It should be a fantastic show. Tickets are $35 and $30 for a concession. Also, on the 8th of April, there's a Pacific Island family night here with music and dancing and food. And then this weekend on Friday night, which is what I'm warming up for now, is the second birthday of the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame here in Gilmore-A. And of course then every Wednesday night, that's tomorrow night, Wednesday Words, open mic night here from the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. And I'll tell you what, we have got a really great show coming up every Wednesday because you just never know what the poets are going to bring. We got the wonderful Ashley Albanese and his John and Ono and Baz the Baz stuff. Steve Wordsmith, we got Gladys Wilson, and sometimes Rob Baker comes in and does some singing there, and Paul Wood. There's a bit of a Doug Scott comes up from Armadale as well as Ashley, and you just never know who's going to turn up. Gabriel Dunleavy, the famous professor of accounting. You wouldn't know that, would you? You just think he's a funny poet. Yeah, because we have a fun night. And don't forget, tune in to the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame every Wednesday night from about 6:40. We go for about an hour and a half, and sometimes even longer, depending on how much we got to get through. And it's really, really fun. And funny as well. And funny, yeah. And everybody wants to hear funny stuff. And I don't know if I've got any more funny stuff. More funny stuff. Not on me. Well, alright, we'll do one more, and then I know what I could do. How McDougall topped the score. A Peaceful Plate. This is by Thomas E. Spencer. It's quite long, but it's funny. Peaceful places, pipers flat, the folk that live around, they keep themselves by keeping sheep and turning up the ground. But the climate is erratic and the consequences are the struggle with the elements is everlasting war. We plough and sow and harrow, then sit down and pray for rain, and then we all get flooded out and have to start again. But the folk are now rejoicing as they never rejoiced before, for we played Molongo cricket and McDougall topped the score. Molongo had a head on it and challenged us to play a single innings match for lunch, the losing team to pay. We were not great guns at cricket, but we couldn't well say no, so we all began